Hey, Kilted Warrior here. Hope you're having a great day. Remember to subscribe if you enjoy this video, and if you'd like to see more videos covering Elder Scrolls, Fallout and Mass Effect, feel free to check out the channel. Otherwise, let us begin. Morrowind, Domerith, Resdain, a land of fire and ash. Here, fleeing persecution, Veloth and his people made a home in the shadow of doom and destiny. They were to be tested, and though they would stumble and face ruin from within and from without, the spirited people, worshipping gods old and new, would endure and create a legacy of triumph, hubris, regret, and be at the heart of events that would define a people, the world, and the divine. And its saints and heroes would never be forgotten, so long as the ancestors watch over the heirs of the moon and star.
Now go, mortal. Embrace your destiny. Defend these lands with my blessing.
Just a quick spoiler warning, this video will spoil much of Morrowind's main plot as well as its Tribunal expansion, with some minor references also to ESO where it lines up with Morrowind's main story, though largely those will just be quotes of interest. Anyway, join me as we delve into the Tribunal of Morrowind. The founding of the Tribunal. The first era of Tamriel's history is arguably its most significant. It brought many world-changing events: the coming of the Atmorans and the fall of the Snow Elves, the Alessian Rebellion and the fall of the Ayleids, the Red Wave sweeping across Hammerfell. Yet there was another set of events that would define not just the history of the continent, but also lead to a series of events that would see the rise of heroes, prophecies fulfilled, and a divine reckoning that echoed across the ages until its climax. I speak of the War of the First Council, the disappearance of the Dwemer, the murder of Indril Nerevar, the fall of the Sixth House, and the rise of the Tribunal, the Almalexia, as the dust settled. Yet it would not be the end of that story. Yet what happened? How did these events transpire? Well, for centuries the Dwemer and the Chimer of Resdain coexisted in what would become known as Morrowind, and in particular on the island of Vardenfell, where the Dwemer would dig deep and build many great citadels. A friendship formed between the two peoples, as they had once drove out the mighty Nords. Yet what would bring them, and the Nords then under Wulfharth, what would bring them to Red Mountain? Why would it become so important? It is simple. The Dwemer found deep within Red Mountain something the gods had never intended to be found: the heart of Lorkhan, the heart of the world, a thing of divine power unlike any other. With the great enchanter and smith, Kagranak, seeking to tamper with the heart, unlock its secrets, and perhaps elevate the god-hating and cynical Dwemer and their mechanical god. Yet it is as if the heart called for help. Indril Nerevar, king of Resdain, king of the Chimer, at the behest of Azura, and having also possibly been warned by Vorin Dagoth about the Dwemer's plans. And then Wulfharth, king of the Nords, Shezareen, would hear its call and march against the Dwemer in turn. It is not clear what happened, even the dates and sequence of events are unclear. What is clear was the outcome. The Nord army and its king lay dead on the slopes of Red Mountain, the Thu'um having failed them, and Indril Nerevar stood poised to punish the Dwemer in time. Yet they were to disappear without a trace. Nobody knows why. One such claim being that after killing Dumag, Azura showed Nerevar how to use the tools of Kaganak, to use the heart, and undo the supposed immortality they had gained from it, turning them into dust. And Nerevar would return to the heart and pause. Like anyone faced with divine power laid out before them, Nerevar pondered what should be done. He asked his friend and scion of House Dagoth to guard the heart, while he would seek counsel. He did, and true to his faith in the goddess of twilight, he sought to prevent further tampering by releasing the heart. But as he would seek to carry out his patron's will, he would be betrayed by those he had trusted. The question was, what exactly happened? For Dagobert, he was either killed by Nerevar, or he killed him, or even King Dumak of the Dwemer, wounding Nerevar as he killed him. It seems most likely, given Azura's comments, that Dagoth gave in to temptation to use the heart, and his friend slew him for it.
Lord Dagoth's temptation.
And in his council, including Soule, Vivec, and his partner and queen Almalexia, either slew Dagobert or again, as Azura claimed, murdered Nerevar.
Whatever gave you the idea that I was helping that murderer?
Regardless of the reality, Nerevar was dead, Dagoth was dead, and with Soule learning the secrets of Kagranak's works, was able to manipulate the song of divinity that emanated from the heart with Kagranak's tools. The Tribunal was born, new gods replacing the old. But this sacrilege, its own betrayal of Nerevar, would not go unpunished, as whatever they claimed, the companions of Nerevar, Dagoth, and the Tribunal alike had broken their oaths to him and to Azura, and she would mark the Dunmer's skin with their shame, and the Lady of Prophecy would warn the false gods of their eventual end, as she was patient, and her champion would rise again. Yet the age of the Temple, the Almcivi, as god rulers had begun, and would have great triumphs, lead the Dunmer against many foes mortal and immortal alike, achieving wonders. But in the end, you cannot outrun fate.
Sotha, Soule, Almalexia, and Vivec represent what was. Beings who won the Dunmer people's hearts with their actions, but blinded them just the same. They were aberrations, false prophets. They used their status as heroes to shield the true Tribunal from our minds.
The Tribunal, a theocracy like no other. It is hard to understate how significant the rise of the living gods was for the Dunmer people. Having been Chimera and being cursed by the goddess their ancestors had worshipped since Veloth led his people away from the Aedra, suddenly the new gods were faced with reconciling the tribes of the Chimera, the houses, their religious beliefs, and explaining what happened as the great champion of Azura and unifier, the great Ashcan Indril Nerevar, lay dead, having led the Chimera for a generation as a beloved hero and statesman. The answer was the Tribunal Temple and the consolidation of the great houses, which successfully incorporated key elements of the previous Chimera culture into a new Dunmer one. And religion was at the heart of it. Yet how, if you are the Tribunal, do you replace the old gods that Veloth had championed and Nerevar had served? It's simple. You don't replace them. You reincorporate them as the good Daedra and the bad Daedra. You continue reasonable worship of the deities closest to the Chimera's hearts, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala, as ancestors who, though second to the living gods, would continue to be respected as the anticipations of the free, while the more insidious Daedra would be folded into the four corners of the House of Troubles, with Molag Bal, Mehrunes Dagon, Sheogorath, and Malakath, who were to be considered foes that test the Dunmer people, while Saint Veloth would still be canonized as a greater saint alongside Saint Nerevar the Captain, and further saints would be chosen by the Tribunal to consolidate their position in Dunmer customs. For the Tribunal, it was a savvy solution that allowed them to adapt the decentralized religious sects of the Chimera into a united temple, with them front and center, with the Ordinators becoming the enforcers of the new order. Whatever may be said of the temple, its tribunes, whether it be the great deeds of its saints, its priesthood, or the acts of cruelty and oppression that would become commonplace among the Ordinators, none can say it didn't successfully permeate Dunmer society, and even after the fall of the Tribunal, it would live on, adapting once again, with the Theocracy continuing, now with the Tribunal becoming saints, and the good Daedra returning as the new Tribunal, reclaiming their place, the Reclamations. Its successful continuity, further proof of the effectiveness of the Tribunal's design and their importance to Dunmer history. Yet to truly understand this, we must consider each of the great tribunes, for each of them was unique, each offering something that made sure the temple would dominate Dunmer society for 2 eras.
Almalexia defies simple analysis. I doubt she could even describe herself accurately. To understand Almalexia, you must first understand the value of fiction. Vivec fancies himself the poet, but in truth, AM is the greater storyteller. She believes her tales implicitly, as does everyone else. Her capacity for deception appears limitless. She sows lies like a master gardener sows seeds, and the harvest of trust and adulation is breathtaking in scope. As I said, we are, all of us, bound by our nature. Almalexia does what she does because she cannot do otherwise. It will not end well, but then even the best endings rarely bring joy.
Almalexia, Mother Morrowind and Divine Right. Almalexia, AM, Mother Morrowind, Lady of Mercy. The living goddess of the Tribunal had a special place in the hearts of her people. Like her fellow tribunes, she sought to guide them and protect them, as she had once been the Queen of the Chimera, Queen of Resdayn. Yet like all living gods of the Tribunal, her power came from a deception, a lie, a betrayal committed against Lord Nerevar all those years ago. As Soule noted, she is indeed a most complex individual and could demonstrate a savvy political mind, great kindness, and a desire to shield her people, but also could be cruel, ruthless, and merciless when pushed. A curious thing for the Lady of Mercy. For there are 2 Almalexias, one who is a mother and champion of her people, who once fought Maerens Dagon alongside fellow tribune Soule. They may have been unable to stop him destroying Mournhold, but she made sure that they avenged it as she drove her sword Hope's Fire into the Daedric Prince, banishing him. And then again when she was able to acquire the help of the legendary Wolfhearth, who had no love for the Tribunal as they fought against the Akaviri invasion and Deir Kamal's army in the Second Era. Yet there is then the Almalexia who believed in the divine right of the Tribunal, that they were not to be questioned, that their authority was absolute, and that regardless of the truth of their divinity, she would do whatever it took to maintain the lie, for without the lie, what was she but a mortal queen again, faced with the reality of what her and the Tribunal had done? That fear, and complete dedication to maintaining the lie was at the core part of her rule. She was to be idolized, not humanized, or mirrorized as would be more appropriate. She understood that politically there was little to be gained from Vivec's indulging in being the mirror of the people. Power requires difference. Divinity requires being of the heavens. In the sacred places mortals may only tread if chosen. In that, she understood how to be seen as a god without using her power directly. Sad, given that without divinity, she may have maintained her position long term, given her keen political mind. Yet the realization of your own mortality, for any of us, can be a shock to one's sense of self. So when Dagorfur returned, cutting off the Tribunal from the source of their power, it affected all the tribunes in their own way. Almalexia was unable to reconcile what she would lose. She did not trust her ability to transition to a world without the living goddess, and it would be to her undoing. As with a failed attempt to rid Vardenfell of Dagorfur, and his corruption again after centuries of battles, losing Kagranak's Sunder and Keening, it would bite hard. Yet faced with the reality, she would refuse it. As the tribunes became isolated from each other, she would attempt to maintain the lie, even as the Nerevarine would destroy Dagorfur, as now it was official, the heart was freed, and the chance of renewed divinity with it. Still believing she could maintain the lie, Almalexia would kill her fellow tribune, Soule, within his Clockwork city, as he had predicted, and attempt to kill the Nerevarine. It would fail, and the sad conclusion of the once mighty goddess had been realized. Yet the dumber do not remember what she became, but what she had been, as Saint Almalexia the Warden, venerated for her courage and her desire to protect her people.
I am only what time and circumstance made me. Son of a lost house, friend to a fallen king. Some will tell you that we are the product of our choices. I've never found that to be the case. I am whatever the people need me to be. A guardian, an oppressor. For some, too distant. For others, too meddlesome. I am the canvas upon which they paint their dreams and resentments. A vessel for their hopes and doubts. A mirror, nothing more. I don't.
Soule, the Clockwork God, and the inevitable conclusion. Soule, Set, the father of mysteries. The Clockwork God is unique not only among his peers, but a curiosity to divine beings in Mundus and in Oblivion. For he is not only an inheritor of part of Lorkhan's power via the heart, but is also the inheritor of the legacy of the Dwemer. He is endlessly fascinated by how the enigmatic race managed to garner a rational and secular understanding of the divine, as Kagranak sought to use the power of the heart, power the great Numidium, the mechanical god. But Set was also intrigued by the more common automata of the Dwemer that were part of their everyday life and their society, always thinking how he might improve upon them. It was through his own brilliance as a mage, engineer and thinker that Soule was able to understand what Kagranak had achieved with his tools, and gained a glimpse into the nature of the divine that his fellow Almcivi would never truly comprehend. Soule is not a cold automata without empathy. He is a being who sought to defend not only his own people, but also of mortal kind from oblivion, for he understood what the Dwemer did not. Nirn, Mundus, was the realm of the Aedra, for they, like him, were empathetic creators, flawed but committed to it, and that it was the denizens of oblivion that would threaten it, threaten the grand plan of the ever-improving and complex endeavour. So it was with this consideration and the destruction of Gilvedale by Molag Bal that would lead Set to prove his rational perspective and divine insight that could effect great change, progress, as he arranged for 8 Daedric princes to agree to the Cold Harbour Compact, preventing them from stepping upon Nirn again, with conditions of course. It was a great achievement, and with Dagon breaking the pact and destroying Mournhold, Set, alongside Almalexia, would banish him and then move to block Dagon's Deadlands from accessing Nirn again, teaching the princes the extent Sotha Soule would go to protect Nirn if the Aedra were unable to do so. It taught him that any creation is a process of testing and improvement. Progress to Set would be done in careful steps, and even then he was wise enough to understand it was a struggle against the inevitable end that even he could not control, just as it seemed had happened to the Dwemer. And therefore he was truly wise. He was not arrogant, he was always calm, thoughtful, and had a perception of both reality and people that his other tribunes did not possess. He was introspective, saw their flaws and his own, but sought to understand them. In the end, he was the one who foresaw the end even before Dagoth Ur rose again, and he knew that he was not the one to solve the equation of existence, its true purpose, yet he came closer than most, and when the time came and Almalexia, as he predicted, would end his life as their divinity was fading, Mundus would lose the great myrrh that even Dyvaith Fear and the Sigics had respected as a colleague, yet his teachings would live on, as he was to be venerated as Saint Sotha Soule the Magus.
Farewell, Dyvaith Fear. We will not meet again. Vivec is my brother. He knows my struggles, and I know his. That knowledge makes our relationship complicated. To truly know someone is as much a curse as it is a blessing. Regret. We are bound by that, at least. He also suffers a kind of enslavement. Not unlike my own, in fact. Beauty holds the keys to his shackles. Beauty and a love of great works, great heights. His appetites are insatiable, thus his despair. Yes, a poet's despair. Vivec craves radical freedom, the death of all limits and restrictions. He wishes to be all things at all times. Every race, every gender, every hero, both divine and finite. But in the end, he can only be Vivec. Not even remotely.
Vivec, the warrior poet. This is not my story. Vivec, Vec, the warrior poet, the living god of songs and heroism, standing vigilant in defense of sacred Vardenfell and Morrowind. As a mortal, it was Vivec who found Sotha Soule when his house had been destroyed, leading Set to call him brother. Upon apotheosis, he would take the island of Vardenfell and Red Mountain into his care, a guardian, a warrior, but he was also the tribune who basked in the warmth and adoration of his people as a poet, friend, and philosopher, guiding, teaching the Dunmer of knowledge that comes through experience of all things. For Vivec was an artist at heart, and he was not content to be the divine warrior poet atop his tower, for that would be awfully boring. No, he believed experiences in all its forms could stave off the monotony of divinity and open one's mind to life and wisdom of mortality. And though he would never be satiated in his pursuit of higher meaning and contentment, his song would still echo through the ages. The warrior poet had many adventures and tales to tell, some involving the divine, such as his encounter and the knowledge he gained from Molag Bal, and his dalliance with darkness, as it were. Or when Sheogorath sought to destroy Vivec city with the moon Bardau, subjugating it, by demonstrating his daring and courage. Of the other deeds laid out in the Pilgrimage of the Seven Graces, from the humility of assisting a farmer as a work animal to help his community, to the creation of the Ghost Fence to symbolise Dunmer pride in standing against adversity, and the enemies of Morrowind, as Vivec stood vigil against the rise of the Sixth House, even without his fellow tribunes. Yet, with any poet, there is both lies and truths behind every word, every statement. For was the Ghost Fence and his vigil a sign of pride and strength, or was it a testament to the hubris of the Tribunal as they were stuck in a losing battle with the growing power of Dagoth Ur? For Vivec was not simply seen as benevolent, but like his peers hid a darker side. He oversaw the Ordinator's attacks and suppression of religious ideas that contradicted his own and the Tribunal's beliefs, especially those regarding Nerevar and the Nerevarine prophecies, with some believing it was Vivec that murdered Lord Nerevar. A curious thing, as he personally rejected claims that he betrayed Nerevar, despite having sworn not to take divine power from the heart, and having the temple preach the lie that he attained divinity through his own enlightenment. That is, the essence of Vivec as the warrior poet is speaking truths, half-truths, and lies when required, generous and kind, but pragmatic and cruel if necessary to maintain his and the Tribunal's power. Yet they say the true measure of someone is found when facing their end, as despite what he may or may not have done or said in the past, when the ghost of Nerevar caught up to him, when the Nerevarine came, Vivec would accept his fate, overcome his personal flaws attested to by Set, assisting the legendary hero in ending Dagoth Ur, even though it meant an end to his own divinity. He might have been a rogue, a murderer, hero, paragon and liar, all things at all times, but in the end, the poet's last stanza was one of self-sacrifice, and assisting the rise of those he had once persecuted. His plan saved Morrowind once again. It paved the way for the rebirth of Dunmer society. They call him Saint Vivec the Poet, but perhaps he should be called Saint Vivec the Redeemer.
But my companions, Vivec and Almalexia, see their divinity as essential. Godhood brings them joy and purpose. They find meaning in the theatrical. Who am I to deprive them of that? Look around you. All of this exists because it must exist. I stand here, in this place, in this moment, not because I wish to, but because I have to. A result of action and consequence.
The legacy of the Tribunal. Divine power, flawed mortals. So what do we make of the living gods? We know little about them, some of their deeds, their ends. Of course, I've only scratched the surface of these most curious individuals, in particular Vivec, which no doubt will have not gone unnoticed by many of you, as I do plan further discussion of the concept of Trim at a later date. Yet, what can we say of them, who they were, their personalities, their influence, and the truth behind the events that gave them their divine power, as well as their legacy? Well, on a personality level, each of them was distinct, and they had both positive and negative traits that made them how they were, as we discussed, but also how it relates to their legacy and how they are viewed. First you have Almalexia as a prime example of the old divine right of kings concept and absolute monarchy, for she understood that just because your authority is based on a lie doesn't mean you let people know that fact, and you must never let the mask slip. Anyone familiar with the late Roman emperors or absolute monarchies will understand that being perceived as beyond your subjects, beyond their comprehension, and being anointed either by the divine or being divine in your own right, has its uses for maintaining power. Again, always remember that the Tribunal knew the truth of their divinity. They simply viewed how to treat it in different ways. So in the case of Vivec, as the idealistic poet, he acts as a enlightened despot, willing to close the gap with the people to an extent and appear open to new ideas and change, which he was to an extent, but also noted that with the suppression of the dissident priests, and much like real-world enlightened despots, if someone poses a direct challenge to your narrative, you must destroy them. Then you have Soule, who is more like a technocratic ruler, who cares not about the perception of power in and of itself, but what works and what is required, in this case, to protect Mundus and Morrowind. Hence why many of his apprentices and also his colleagues, such as Barilzar and Devefir, could hold completely opposing opinions to his own, but he would still respect and allow them to have those opinions. So each tribune perceived power in different ways, but their other personality traits, when combined with this, meant that when Dagorfur rose again, they reacted in their own ways. Almalexia and Vivec naturally both feared losing their divinity, as they saw it as part of them, intrinsic to them. But Almalexia, like many hardline authoritarians, benevolent or otherwise, cannot see a way out that involves the loss of power or position, while Vivec, as the enlightened despot, sees a way out, if at a personal cost, and is willing to reconcile some of his past decisions, though note he still skirts responsibility for Nerevar's death. Hence, he does the right thing overall, but avoids admitting guilt, which makes sense for an idealistic and slightly egotistical poet. Soule, on the other hand, sees that his time has come and accepts he will not be the one to solve the many questions he has asked about divinity and the Dwemer, and he is content with that. He seems to have predicted his own demise, and given he never viewed divinity as anything but a means to an end, he would leave it to others to discover the many truths still left hidden. So you have three flawed individuals who chose three paths in the end: denial, conditional acceptance, and unconditional acceptance. Yet what of Nerevar? None of the tribunes directly say they killed Nerevar. Only Soule generally notes regret at many actions. To me it seems the dissident priests were correct, or at least are more trustworthy than, say, Vivec's account. Obviously Dagorfur's account, which he notes in a message he sends you, is wrong, but Dagorfur is a fascinating but insane character, which I love, if that wasn't clear, as a villain. But his ego is so inflated he can't comprehend even the possibility that the Nerevarine might turn down divine power in a selfless act, let alone the fact that he would accept any responsibility for his own actions. With Vivec though, he is accepting of what needs to be done, but he's still a propagandist. Whatever happens in the end, his interests, even as a mortal Vivec, are better served by pretending he didn't murder Nerevar. He gains nothing from being truthful on this point, to his credit, which shows that he's quite shrewd. Hence why in our own world politicians generally never apologise or admit wrongdoing. It is a lose-lose situation in terms of power if you do so. And Vivec is certainly intelligent enough to understand this. So yes, I believe Vivec did kill Nerevar, not only because it makes sense for him to be the instigator, but also it's better story-wise and makes Vivec a more interesting and ambiguous character, which is part of what I've always liked about him, his ambiguity. Hence he's still worthy of the title God Hero for his tenure, but there are so many strings attached to that. As to Almalexia and Sophicel's role, Almalexia had to be co-opted to give the Tribunal early legitimacy. Given her view of power, it makes sense she would want to continue as a leader of the Chimera, transitioning from the partner of a powerful monarch to a power in her own right. Again, like Vivec, they view power and their divinity as essential to who they are, while Soule was a pragmatic mage even before gaining divinity, and he also has a close bond with Vivec, so could easily be convinced to join his plan. Long story short, and again this is my own opinion on the events, Nerevar kills Dagofur, who tried to tamper with the heart and for reasons still unknown was able to form a connection with the heart. He may have gained knowledge of Kagranak's tools, or proximity upon death may have been enough. Then Vivec instigated a plot involving Almalexia and Soule to murder Nerevar and claim divinity while lying to the Chimera people, who obviously would become the Dunmer, about the events and the origin of their divinity as attested to by temple doctrine. And also they would keep the secrets of Kagranak's tools and the heart to themselves as a result. And Azura then naturally prophesizes their fall and protects Nerevar's soul as to be allowed to return as the Nerevarine when the time is right. All that said, the reality of the events might not technically matter, even if it is interesting to ponder. So let me know what your thoughts on the truth of the matter. Obviously we can't know for sure, but I feel Vivec's own admissions lay bare the underlying truth of the matter which he's trying to conceal. It does beg the question. As I have noted, Dagofur can't be trusted on accounting events either. The question is, can Azura be trusted? As the victor, she gets to direct the Reclamation's temple to perpetuate her version of events. So again, let me know your thoughts. Of course, her version of events is also supported by the dissident priests as well as the Ashlanders, with slight variations of course. I will discuss this further when I cover both the Nerevarine and Azura in the future.
You have done well, mortal. The death of Almalexia is a boon for all of Morrowind, though it may take time for this to be understood. She would have betrayed the Dunmer as surely as she had betrayed all those whom she loved. This was her curse and her undoing. Weep not for Sotha. He shared his mortality long ago, and I am certain his death was no small relief to him. These gods lived with the burden of a power no mortal was meant to possess.
Conclusion. Each event is preceded by prophecy. The living gods lost their divinity, and Morrowind stood at a crossroads of its future. Yet how did this nation-defining event come to pass? For each event is preceded by prophecy, but without the hero, there is no event. Next time we will explore the most legendary hero that reshaped the future of Morrowind, the Nerevarine, who cast down Dagofur, freed the heart of Lorkhan, and was the undoing of the Tribunal and Hircine's great hunt. As always, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, remember to subscribe and give me your thoughts on the Tribunal and Morrowind. I hope you do enjoy this series as it goes forward. I do intend to cover a number of pieces of Morrowind lore in this season of Morrowind, so any thoughts on anything you would like covered, also mention that. I do have a plan in place, but I would love to hear your thoughts. That said, thanks for watching, stay safe, and please have a great day.